Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We're here with Amy Anderson from wildcoffeemarketing.com. Amy is a widely respected and creative industry leader, and she sees the unique opportunity to leverage creativity to transform both brands and entire organizations across multiple sectors. And we have so much to talk about. Maybe we will talk about client management, managing large teams, challenges and balancing that pesky work and personal life. Who the heck knows what? Amy, glad to be talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm super glad to have you on. I'm glad we finally were able to connect. I think at one point you couldn't make it and I couldn't make it, but that is just the hectic lifestyle that we live in. And so what has been kind of your focus, your passion the last 6 to 9 months or so?
Well, after recovering from COVID, which I think all of us had a little bit of that to do, and really sort of keeping things moving with our clients, we've really just been building our creative team. We have hired some incredible journalists as social media experts, which is sort of our new focus, and really just trying to churn out some really great creative work so that we're really proud of.
Well, that's exciting. And I think that I felt a little bit of a push myself. It hadn't quite clicked until just now that right before all the COVID kind of stuff happened, I was kind of moving in that direction of actually taking this business thing seriously and actually having a team and not doing all the work myself and trying to scale things. And that was always a thing on my to-do list for so many years. And I would hire 1 or 2 employees and kind of dabble at it a little bit. But right before the pandemic started is when I started actually building a team deliberately. And then it feels like maybe when the pandemic ramped up, there was all that pressure, right? It seemed like it's like some of the old customers were kind of not there anymore and there were new people. And it felt like there was a lot of competition with all this remote work and a lot of things to be expected. So I feel like just in the way that you put that, it's not clicking. The pandemic kind of pushed me to take my business seriously. And it seems like maybe something similar happened with you too.
Well, I think a lot of us were sort of impacted by the great shuffle, right? That's still going on with clients doing well, clients really in turmoil in this market, supply chain issues, extreme growth. All of a sudden, venture capital money is back in. So it just feels like everything is in movement all the time, much more so than normal, right? We're in a difficult hiring market. We're in a difficult growth market. And then some sectors are sort of taking off and they hire us 2 months too late. And then we have to scramble to help them get caught up. So, we've always sort of worked at a really fast pace, but in this market, I just feel like there's so much movement that everyone's trying to keep up with right now. It's exciting, but
yeah, it's exciting in a little bit of a scary, chaotic way. And I feel like, and again, I feel like the couple of clients I've gotten this year, it's been a similar situation where there's a mess to clean up. They don't really know what to do at this point. And I kind of have been getting this kind of repeating answer, this is the 3rd or 4th attempt at this, right? So for example, with you having your creative team and your writers, I imagine there's a lot of well, we tried this a year ago, we tried this 6 months ago, and finally we have Amy and the team helping us out. And so do you have any fun stories to share with us just to kind of give us an idea of the magic that you do, the secret sauce, the kind of activities that you and your team perform for businesses?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is people ask us what type of company that we're right for a lot of the time. And what we're finding in this year, a lot of times there will be a single person marketing team that's actually really effective, right? So it's a team of one. And they tend to be really strategic and implementers, but there's only so much they can do in this market. And repeatedly, we've had a really good marketing leader call and say, you know what, I think I've taken this as far as I can go. And we really have been able to augment that. And we've seen that twice happen. They're effective, right? But we're expected to go so wide and so deep with our skill sets in marketing and digital, right? Everything from SEO, PPC, strategy, branding strategy, content creation, video development, social media. I mean, it's so much that one person can't do all of that. They end up hiring a bunch of freelancers, small agencies, and then things start to get really disjointed. So that's really a theme that we've seen this year, is that people are sort of getting maxed out. And rather than hire an agency, we're actually outsourced marketers. So we can sort of speak their language and be ingratiated with the team. And we work really closely with them that way.
And I mean, that's interesting to think about that, that it's I used to like be really attentive at the problem of switching gears of multitasking, and it seems like it was more obvious back when like phones were slower and computers were slower, and like you remember when your computer took like 5 or 10 minutes just to start up, and for me it was I was really aware of like, okay, I shouldn't be dealing with this client and then answering these emails and then posting on these message boards. But I feel like in the past maybe like 5 to 7 years with computers and phones being like so quick and you can just click on this and use this in the cloud and use this app. I've had to like remind myself that, okay, even though the computer can run really fast and I can have all these tabs open and it won't slow it down, like it still is like a like death pretty much to have all these it could be spread so thin and be trying to do everything ourselves. And I feel like I'm at war with like my own ego because I'm always wrestling with like, well, I could do that better and I could squeeze in the time. And then I always kind of run across this issue of like, well, do I hire a team or do I hire someone to do this thing that I haven't done yet, like this nagging problem, or do I hire someone to like replace a chunk of what I do or something else? And do you ever come across it? Do you ever come across like that resistance of like, well, I'm not sure like what kind of team I'm supposed to hire? Should I do something like replace something new or something existing? I mean, do you come across any kind of that of just like the hiring uncertainty, I guess?
Well, I think it's really hard to scale a service business, right? I mean, when your resource is your people, it's trying to understand the exact skill set that you have. And we're having a little bit of that go on right now with respect to project management, because just what you're talking about, right? People at Wild Coffee wear a lot of hats. They're doing the thinking and the strategy. They're managing clients and those relationships. They are doing some of the work and they're also project managing. So it is so much. So, what piece of that do you sort of pull back and specialize in a specialized skill set? So it's really sort of narrowing it down to a skill set that you know that you can find and a really good person who excels at that you don't want to do, right? Do you time block and sort of set time aside to try to focus on one thing?
I mean, I do, but not as often as I should. It's
Yeah.
always like putting out fires, but then and then again, it's like one of those reminders. Like I forget about. I'm like, oh yeah, I should be just like scheduling the free time. I should be scheduling the time to think because if you're just trying to squeeze it in like 5 minutes and 10 minutes there, like that's not going to work. That's not going to be consistent. And what you're reminding me there is like again, this I feel like this is like just the reminder call, right? All of those
Right.
like really simple things that were so simple and work so well, it's easy to forget. There's always like that e-myth issue, right? Of like, well, you need to have like the worker and the manager and then the person with the commands and even above that, even like kind of the strategy. So that way each person only performs one task and there's not like all those switching gears. And it's a helpful reminder. I feel like I need to hear this like almost every day, if not more often. Like, stop switching gears, stop trying to wear all the hats, only do the one thing because there's these different skill sets. And it feels like even as you're describing this, like switching between the project managing and the client relationships and doing the work and the strategy, like it's going to eat up all the time. Like you won't have any time left in the day because you're always like trying to switch gears, it feels like.
Well, I try to time block. I mean, I lead a 20-person company with my business partner, and I can still block 2 hours, maybe 3 days in advance if I know I have writing to do, if I know I have a strategy deck to do, if I'm working on new business development, if I'm doing a pitch or an RFP. I think that's really critical. The other is clarity breaks. And it's something that we really try to encourage people to do during the day on the team is just to get up and walk, take a moment, read an article, read part of a book, and really just sort of stop being in this doing phase all the time and be in a little bit more of a still and a silent space to just clear your head. So I walk dogs during the day. I know other team members do too. And I think it's important to step away a little bit during the day.
You're so right. And again, this is a thing that I have gotten away from. I used to have such a good morning routine of I'd wake up and even if I had pressing things to do, I'd wake up right around when the sun came up and I'd take like an hour-long walk and I'd feel so good afterwards. And lately, honestly, Amy, these days I've got a new baby, so the time is more kind.
Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you very much, and that the time is more kind of compressed. And sometimes I feel like I sometimes have to jump in just wherever I can squeeze the time, like if it's nap time or if he's not awake yet or if he's gone to bed. But I do feel like that something that maybe I've overcome these last couple of years is just doing the task anyway, right? Even if I don't feel like doing it, and it could be even like doing the client work or even like the time blocking or the clarity blocking, like you're mentioning here. even if the appointment rolls around and it's 8 a.m. and I've got this thing on the calendar, such as even like a podcast interview like this, but something on the calendar. Back in the old days, I would think, you know what, I don't feel like doing it. I'll push this appointment off. I'll cancel it. But these days, I'm saying to myself, I don't know when I will have time later. And I know I kind of don't feel like doing this task, but I maybe feel like 60% like I feel like doing this task, and maybe in the future I might only feel like 10 or 20% worth of doing this task. So you're mentioning, time blocking and this time management thing, and like that's something that I've recently had to remind myself is even if I don't fully feel like doing a thing, it's on the calendar. I need to do it anyway, whether it's time blocking or something, or like sitting and strategizing or something else.
Well, I love that it holds you accountable to have it on the calendar and then you're anticipating it for a few days, right? So I knew this morning that I was going to be working on some strategy for a client. I geared up for that time and then I just got it done. And I think that the calendar really helps you anticipate and hold yourself accountable.
Yeah. So what are we missing here? Like we've kind of talked about like how people need to not do everything themselves, and I mean that's a problem I have. I'm sure it's a problem that you have to some extent, and we're always getting better. But it's at least good to have awareness and be making progress on that. We talked a little bit about like time management and calendaring so far. What's really missing? What are people missing the boat on as far as like their business or their marketing or their time management, or just like what's not being discussed enough?
Strategy. I see a lot of times people will just sort of start diving in marketing and getting into this sort of implementation of all of these tasks without really sitting down and, developing customer personas, empathy maps, really getting into the heart and minds of your consumer. Really understanding. I don't think we can plan in year increments anymore, Robert, right? Remember we used to do like 1 year plan, 18-month plans, and we sort of laugh at that now
It
because
never worked
things are
out,
just
did it?
no, we may have a little bit, in the early 2000s, but certainly not now. So really to look at a quarter, to look at your core strategy for that quarter, 6-month period, and not just start doing, people will start posting and creating and buying ads and all of that without a really sound strategy. And we have to make people stop and think and tie it into the core business objectives and sit in executive meetings with our clients to really understand how marketing is impacting all of that. So I think a lot of it is just to really think before you do. And a lot of times we have to sort of reverse engineer and sort of start over for clients in a turnaround situation or when we're sort of starting an engagement in that way.
And that hits me really hard because again, thinking about the like my own kind of like hiccups the last year and like kind of where we're at with some of these clients coming in, you hear a lot about, and it's always stated in different terms, but there's like the throwing of the ball and catching of the ball, right? And so
Right.
like you mentioned like buying ads, for example, or posting content, and it's really easy to throw some balls, right? Who cares where they end up? And I'll post some stuff, I'll make some ads, and then it sits there, and then days later or weeks later you say, oh yeah, what about that Facebook ad I ran? Oh, looks like it got no clicks. I guess I'll put that aside, and then it becomes, at least for me, it becomes like something I dread because it's something that I failed at. Well, I didn't really fail at it. I just didn't follow through, or didn't do something complete with it. And then and yeah, and it's like there's so many situations where there's like out LinkedIn or cold email outreach or something where there needs to be like not just putting things out there, but then having a strategy, as you said, and like coming back to it. And something that I realized maybe just this morning that I haven't been doing enough of is writing things down. Because when I write things down, I'm thinking like, oh, I need to make like an SOP or like a Google document screenshot. And the thing that, again, we're having this conversation, you're sparking off all these reminders for me, is like I haven't been like journaling, right? Just saying like
Mm.
today's date, here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I'm doing, and then maybe even possibly cleaning out up later and going back and saying like, oh yeah, on Tuesday I did this and this, and maybe like organizing it later, or should be handing it off to someone else to organize it later, right? And so it kind of makes me think of, okay, like where is the line? Like, where do we say, well, I need to be more organized and I need a better system and I need to do this and this versus like hanging it off to a team such as yours? Like, at what point what things are like a black box that someone else should do, and what else is something that like I should fix, do you think?
Right. Well, that's sort of, it's sort of the outsourcing model, right? Is it better to keep your marketing in-house? Is it better to outsource it, or is it better to hand it to an agency? And we're not an agency because we are actually sort of client-signed marketers who run our own agency. So it's really understanding sort of the cost structure of that and how much you are actually capable of doing in-house, and where does it make sense to delegate and hand off. A lot of our client engagements have been 2 and 3 years long, where it is possible to run marketing for a company and not be a full-time employee of the company. It just depends on how you sort of approach that. When we put engagements together, we're actually looking at what percentage of what person's time and what skill sets, and we'll build a team. So you may have a team of 4 people, you may have a team of 7 people, and then we have a very flexible scope, right? So that so much comes up in marketing, and we're very opportunistic. So we end up creating work for ourselves a lot of the times to say, oh, we do ideation sessions. Prom season is coming in the spring, so we're already thinking about that. And we work with a formal wear client with 100 tuxedo rental locations in the middle quarter of the US. So already we're starting to do ideation on TikTok, Snapchat, reaching out to influencers. And so we're able to sort of plan and execute full marketing programs and strategies without being full-time employees of a company. And this is the white space we saw in the market, right? That it doesn't have to be all in-house, and it doesn't have to be an expensive agency model. It can be the strategists and the marketers who are actually implementing the work.
And you hear about that a lot more these days with like things like a fractional CMO, or with remote work, or people kind of like doing the work in the time that they want to do it. And also your answers here remind me of just how important it is to plan ahead, which again seems like really it's such common sense advice that people don't follow that. But like you hear that a lot in like in e-commerce, right? They plan for like the busy Q4 season during Q3, or the people who like generate content sites and things like that. They're writing their Halloween content in the summer, and they're writing their Christmas content in September and all that, because if you wait until the time when you need to do it, it's already too late. Everyone's already like listed on Google, or got the traffic or the links, or any of that stuff. So that's just like in general a good idea, right? Of just see if you can plan for something months ahead of time. That way you start the work now, you hire the team, you do the interviews and all that, and then you kind of debug the system, so that way when you actually need it, it's already done. So that's a good just lesson in general. And so you kind of dropped in some of these kind of fun, a few like fun kind of interesting, client stories and success stories and things like that. Like, what would you say makes you and your team unique? Like you've talked about, like building a team, you do all these things differently, but like, how are you unique versus like someone else that we might go with?
Well, we're actually client-side marketers. The senior consultants who run the business have actually been VPs of marketing, CMOs at companies. And so they are used to developing strategies and running marketing teams on the client side. So what they are now is just the CMO or the VP of marketing for 4 different clients at the same time. So that's that fractional CMO model that you mentioned, and that's what we run. We don't just develop a strategy and give you a beautiful deck and say goodbye. Then we say, okay, are we in alignment on this strategy? And then we actually have our own in-house agency that implements that strategy, right? Typically, you would just get the implementation piece of the creative, or you might just get the advisory services of the consulting firm. With us, it's all built into one. So we believe that every company, even small, maybe even 3 or 4 people, may need CMO services, because you have to have that strategy before you just start doing. The difference is that you don't need us all the time, right? If you're a smaller company, you can't afford or have a CMO on full time. But when you do that fractional service, you get access to the strategy and then the implementation. And we're actually using our own model. We just hired a fractional CFO. Makes perfect sense. We don't have a high transaction business, so we don't need them there full time. But we need the forecasting, balance sheet work, right, ability to really understand our gross profit margin. So he's with us, just not every day. So I'm glad to see that we're practicing that model sort of in other segments.
You would hope so, right?
Right.
What's the point in having this innovative thing if you yourself are not doing it?
We're
And
walking
so
our talk, right?
yeah, yeah, you might as well. And even just a little bit of your kind of your thought process there, like I think that like you said, like it's very much needed and it kind of fills a gap there. And like a big change in my thinking at some point was, well, I'm going to decide ahead of time how much time I'll devote to making this thing work. Because there's always the hesitation of like, well, should I hire this person or should I buy this kind of high ticket monthly software or should I pay these ads? And there's always just kind of a hesitation of like, well, I need to save up for that or I need to carve out something in the budget every single month. And at some point I was just like, well, I'll give myself 3 months for this new project for like this Etsy sort of work, or I'll give myself 6 months for this podcast editor or something like that. And like that's helped me so much. And I'm hearing a little bit of that in your answers here in that, well, you might only need to hire out for like this chunk of time for the strategy, or you might only need to hire out for like these handful of people for this number of hours per week. And so kind of like along those lines, has there like what kind of resistance has there been for people using you and your team? Because we mentioned a little bit about like the outsourcing kind of hesitation, but when you say, well, you need a strategy, we need to do these things, what kind of objections have you come across from people who are like, they need what you provide, but they haven't quite pulled the trigger?
Well, we have learned that if an executive team has been successful without a significant amount of time and budget dedicated to marketing, it is difficult to convince them that they can accelerate their business even further by deploying it, right? If you don't really believe in what we do and that brands have value and that customer centric communications are really important, delivering the right message to the right person at the right time in the right way about the equity of your brand and how it increases the value of your company, I cannot convince you that that is very important. And we've been in that scenario just one time. But that was sort of eye-opening for me. I was thinking, well, everybody believes in marketing. I mean, this is an industry that is vibrant and growing, and we have so much data to support the value that we bring. But really, if an executive team, if they're like, look, we've gotten this far without it, it's really hard to convince them that they need it.
And so, I mean, like you or I can't convince someone like that, but what should they do? Should they be like going back and like looking at the marketing principles? Or like if someone says, well, I've lucked out up to this point, or I've done something magical and I'm not sure how long the gravy train will last, what should people be doing? Should they just be getting more education or wait until things get bad? Like, or do we just ignore that segment of the marketplace?
I think that that's just somebody, we say that typically is not going to work. Typically what they'll do is hire a junior marketing person who gets a little bit of graphic design and some things posted on a website. Right. And that's sort of how it's almost like being in a plane at the top of the clouds. You can't change the altitude and you're just sort of bumping along there, and they continue to bump along there. And they may have growth because they have a strong sales team. They may have a product that's super viable in a market and they survive that way, but if you don't really sort of believe in that, we have a client that was just named one of the top fintechs to watch in Miami, and they wholeheartedly believe that their growth is coming from the pipeline that we are creating for their fintech, right? We're doing a ton of inbound marketing. They really value and watch over their brand. Lots of video, full Salesforce deployment. So that's just sort of a very rich environment of growth of an early stage company with a CEO who's super sharp and gets it. So that was another case, right, where they had a really strong one-person team who was trying to sort of outsource and hire freelancers, and it was really hard for her to keep it together and really develop the growth. And we came in and have a pretty full engagement with them with a person. I think we have 9 people on our team working on that account at any given time. So.
And so when you're explaining some of these people's situations, it kind of brings to mind how you mentioned earlier about this whole thing with marketing is there's the right this, the right this, the right this, right? Like the right problem, the right person, the right time. And so for many people, it might just not be the right time yet. And you're reminding me of the whole like that idea of like with the funnel, and you have like just a ton of people like with your reach and with your list that they're not quite ready yet, right? The problem isn't quite bad enough where they haven't been weeded out by a recession or a pandemic or some upending in their industry. So maybe things are good, but if things start slipping or if things maybe could be better, if they're tired of the same old stuff, if they want something new, if they don't like the whole like limping along feeling, then maybe it is time for them to pull the trigger and talk to you and your company and figure out some strategy, figure out some marketing, figure out all these things that they know they should be doing. But and imagine if they combined it with the magic they have now with actually some being deliberate and having a real plan, right?
Right. Well, you say funnel and I get really excited. So it's like the marketing dork in me that cannot hold back. I was actually mentoring some entrepreneurship students this week, and one of them commented, "Gosh, you really love what you do." And I think I get really spazzy and excited when you mention things like funnel. But I think a company's own database is the most valuable asset they have. Even if you have leads in there that are what we would consider cold, right? That's usually they haven't opened an email from you in more than 3 months. I think it's really important to stay top of mind with content that is useful, maybe even entertaining once in a while, so that they just know you're there. And then to really segment the rest of the database according to, have they transacted with you once? Have they interacted with you at all? And that's the beauty of all these systems that we have now to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time, because ultimately marketing is very simple. It is, who are you saying what to and when? What are you saying to whom? And so when you really sort of break it down simply, I just saw an Adobe Cloud commercial today on YouTube, and it was a guy running into a conference room and said, "I just got the 14th irrelevant email from a sales rep, and he has just what I need." And this extreme sarcasm about just not getting something that's useful to you over and over from a sales rep via email. I think it's really important to sort of look at the funnel, segment, and develop really good content. And sometimes it's simple, right? It's a text-based email. It doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to contain video in all cases, not at all.
Well, you're speaking my language, and that for so many years I got so just overwhelmed, stressed out about all the things I should be doing, right? Like, well, you should be having a one-time offer and an upsell, and it should have this whole email sequence. And I mean, I know that there's for all of us, there's like a long list of things that we should be doing, right? And I think I myself, I know I'm a big candidate for someone that just like there's like 25 things at least that I know I should be doing. But at one point, I stopped stressing out about the upselling thing, and I was like, well, maybe a more short-term thing is just to like send some more emails instead. And I would stress out about like tagging leads and sending them off on this branch. And at one point, I thought, why don't I just lead score my leads and just look at the top the top lead score people for this week and just kind of go after them manually, or kind of like you said, like figure out different queries, different views, and say, well, who's bought from me once, who hasn't bought in a year, maybe I can get that person to buy from me like more recently or twice, or just like something to move the needle forward. And like sometimes you hear about, I think it was like Dan Kennedy or someone who was saying like just do a couple of things per day, like just drop this letter in the mail per day, just send this one message to this employee per day. And like that was really helpful. And it seems like that's a little bit of what we're tapped into here, is like just keep it simple, ease yourself into it. You don't have to just like, even though a funnel sounds really cool once it's built and it's all working really great, it is. But if you're feeling like you're behind on like things like retargeting or things like ads, just like figure out a plan and just slowly like inch forward and make these things habits, instead of like flash in the pan fads that you set up once and then you don't finish up anymore. Like that's a bunch of chaos. And so there's so many cool things that can be done and should be done. But as far as you and your company moving forward into the future, what's on the horizon? What's next for you guys?
We have some really interesting sort of big deployment projects coming up. We're doing a lot more with video than we've done. We are breaking into Snapchat and TikTok. I can't believe it's happening, but we are developing some really good content. And think about this, like even B2B players are expected to be publishers in this market. I mean, in order to stay relevant, in order to provide value, right? If you're value selling, you have to provide and deliver really valuable content to people. And it's a lot of pressure for companies. I mean, from healthcare to SaaS firms, fintech, to really develop good content. So we've built a team that has this ability, whether in social or in blog or in video or in podcast, is developing really great relevant content for B2B and B2C companies. We're also doing more with AI and machine learning. So we are working with a few sort of technology partners to really develop sort of the best ads that we can using machine learning to help us rewrite copy. And that's been a really exciting space to be in also.
Exciting, cutting edge.
Yeah.
So if someone is listening to our conversation today and they say, you've checked a lot of the boxes. I know I need content. I know I need strategy. I know I need a team. And perhaps it could be like this fractional thing where I don't have to just like hand over the keys to my whole business. I don't have to throw in 100 grand just as a test to see what happens. So who who can, if there's someone's listening, how do they know if they're the right ideal candidate for you and your company? And if they know that they're the right person, where do they go? What's the next step?
Well, you can find us at wildcoffeemarketing.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn and under Wild Coffee. And the team is developing some good content. So you can see the type of work that we're doing, the clients that we are with. And you can always reach out to us and see if we're a good fit. We do some well-funded early stage startups. We do turnaround work. We do accelerations, digital transformation. Sometimes we'll just do some project work. Whether it be sort of creative design, websites we do as well. So it really just depends. You know what I was thinking too, Robert, with when you were talking earlier about just getting started, I just wanted to be able, it's something we've been talking a lot about, is not letting great get in the way of good. Right? You can think about it and want it to be perfect and think that you have to deploy all of these tactics at the same time. Really, ultimately, good is done, right? And out in the market. And so I urge clients and colleagues and my team, just don't let great get in the way of good, and it'll be out the door because chances are it's probably excellent quality. So
I like that a lot. And you reminded me when you were mentioning about like something about quick and simple emails. That alone was huge, right? And we've all been there, especially early on, especially with email marketing. It's so tempting to say, I need to have a once every Friday newsletter. And first of all, that's boring. Second of all, that's so much work. And third, like, what decade are you living in? And even like a couple of decades ago, back then, I would just say a quick and simple sales letter. Headline, 10 bullet points button. It got the job done. It was something I could improve later. Same thing with the email, something that just took like a minute to read. That when I tried all kinds of different fancy stuff, it's like so many times the simple beat the fancy. So I love what you said there. Don't let
yeah.
great get in the way of good. You have to start somewhere. You have to get that proof of concept. And it's also, I think, more encouraging, right? Because if you can get some easy wins, some early successes, maybe plug some of the leaks in the funnel, or just kind of get some numbers, get some measurements, and then if you can say, well, if I contacted 100 people and I got 3 clients out of that, well then cool. Now I have something that I can repeat, I can refine, and all that fun stuff. So
You have a 3% conversion rate at that point, right? So then you
yeah,
have a benchmark. You have a benchmark key performance indicator that 3 out of 100. That's the holy grail, right? Trying to figure out where you can get your lowest acquisition cost with the least amount of effort. Our business is very much a referral business. That's how we've built it from the ground up, is clients that we've worked with or people we've worked with in the past. But for our clients, it's really understanding where that low acquisition cost is with the least amount of effort, and then be able to scale and sort of crank that up for them.
imagine that, actually having a business based on math, based on logic, and not just on the whims of your emotions. And like, emotions are great, but I know that they lie to me, and I know that if I'm happy 1 second, maybe in 5 minutes something else might ruin my day. So why not do it based on the numbers? And I also imagine that many people are passionate about what they do, what they're doing in their industry. If they love the formal wear and the prom dresses, they don't want to learn things like conversion rates or like customer value or KPI. So why not leave that to the experts at wildcoffeemarketing.com, and we will see you there. And do you have any final parting words of advice or any just like last thoughts that we feel like we weren't able to fit in here, Amy?
Well, for anyone leading teams of people, I just have been really trying to encourage empathy towards people on your teams, and really sort of practice compassion in this market. As we started this conversation, there's a lot of movement, a lot of chaos. I think it's hard on people, sort of what's happening, and to really see what your team is saying, see what they're not saying. And because a lot of us are on Zoom, that we continue to check in with each other as we continue to sort of emerge out of this market. And it's what we try to practice at Wild Coffee, and I hope that others do too.
I like that too. And like, 'cause, one of the many things I do is like, I'm on a team of some like podcast guys. There's like 6 of us, and we hadn't actually met on Zoom until this morning. And I thought like, what is this? It's some meeting. We don't really have a plan. Should I really show up? And I showed up, and I'm glad I did, because now I was able to put the faces of some of these names, and it's just like a simple, easy thing to do, but often overlooked. So it was a really good reminder you have there. I really appreciate that.
Great. Thank you for having me today.
I'm glad to have you, and we will see everyone at wildcoffeemarketing.com. And thank you very much, Amy, for stopping by.
Thanks so much.